Hey everyone, this is Mrs. Mysterious with another episode this week, and today we're going to be covering the case of Joel Guy Jr. Now before I get into it, I just want to thank everyone who has watched my previous episodes and who's watching this episode, and for all of those who have subscribed to the channel. It really helps me stay motivated in making these videos. So before I go any further with this video, I just want to make a disclaimer that viewer discretion is advised for this case. It's very gruesome, it may be triggering for some people, and it's definitely 100% not suitable for children. So if your kids are around, maybe wait until they go to bed or put headphones on before you listen to this case, because like I said, it's pretty gruesome. Okay, so with that said, let's move on. So this case has been all over the news. The actual court proceedings, all of them are on YouTube. So if you watch this video and you're still interested in the case, you can go online on YouTube and watch all of the court proceedings, and I'll put a link in the description down below so you can check that out. But it caught my attention because of the circumstances surrounding the case, which, like I said, they're really gruesome and it's really disturbing, and yet somehow it's very interesting at the same time. So with that, let's move on. So Joel Guy Jr., there's not a ton of information about his childhood, but I was able to get some things off of the internet. He was born in 1988. I'm not entirely sure where, but I think it's Louisiana. His parents were Joel Guy Sr. and Lisa Guy, and Joel Sr. was 61 and Lisa was 55, and he also had 3 half-sisters from his dad. So Joel was called Joe Michael by his family growing up, and his half-sisters described him as being reclusive and kind of standoffish, didn't really want to participate, especially during holidays. But I was able to get some information on Reddit, of all places, which Reddit is great if you don't use it. But there's a user on Reddit who claims to have gone to school with Joel, and they said that Joel was, like I said before, reclusive, kind of antisocial, didn't really have too many friends, but he was wicked smart. He was extremely smart, and he was a lot smarter than a lot of the kids in school. And actually, when he was thinking of an answer to a question, he would rock his body back and forth, kind of like this. So he went to Hanville High School in Louisiana for a little while, and then he, like midway through, he left and started going to the Louisiana School of Math, Science, and Arts in I don't know how to pronounce that. And it's a school for the gifted and talented in Louisiana. And he graduated in 2006. And then after 2006, he attended the Louisiana State University, and he was supposedly studying to be a plastic surgeon in Baton Rouge, and he was living in Baton Rouge. But quick note, he was living in Baton Rouge and going to college for a decade. That's right, 10 years. And the whole time he was there, he was being financially supported by his parents. He never held a job. They paid for his rent. They paid for everything because he didn't work. But anyway, we're going to move on. So Joel's father, Joel Guy Sr., he worked for a pipeline engineering. He worked as a pipeline engineering designer for years, and his mother worked as in the human resources department in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And they had been working for years, as normal people do, and they decided that they wanted to retire. And part of the plan for retiring was they were going to sell their home in Knoxville, Tennessee, and then they were going to move to Sirgowensville, Tennessee. I think that's how you pronounce it, Sirgowensville. Correct me if I'm wrong. But in order to retire, they would have to cut off Joel financially. So their plan was they were going to have Thanksgiving 2016 at their home with the family, with Joel and Joel's half-sisters, and they're going to have a nice day, and that was going to be their last holiday at that house, and then they were going to move to their new house, and around Christmas time, that's when they planned on telling Joel that they were going to cut him off financially. And the family, his half-sisters knew about this plan because the family was in a group chat with each other. Everyone except Joel. But they all knew about this plan to cut him off financially. But I'm pretty sure Joel knew what was going on. But anyway. So on Thanksgiving of 2016, the family met at the house, and Joel's half-sister, Angela Crane, said that Joel's behavior was very strange. He was very talkative. He was very entertaining, which is very unlike him, especially during holidays. He kind of would hide when there were family holidays. He didn't want to participate. But this time, he was totally different personality. And he even wanted to play with Angela's children, which she thought was really weird because she was pretty sure that Joel never even knew the kids' names. So for her, it was almost weirding her out that he was so into hanging out with the kids. So after Thanksgiving, Angela left with the kids, but Joel ended up staying, and he ended up staying for the whole weekend, which was odd because normally he wouldn't do that. So he didn't leave to go back to Baton Rouge, where he was living, until Sunday, or at least that's what the plan was. Well, on Monday, the Monday after Thanksgiving, Lisa Guy never showed up to work, which was odd because she had planned to have a meeting, and she was hosting this meeting at work. And her coworkers were very concerned that she hadn't come home. Hadn't come to work. So they tried calling family members of Lisa's to figure out where she was, and they weren't getting any answers. So they called for a wellness check to make sure Lisa was okay. And what they ended up finding was basically a nightmare. So police went to the home, and they found Joel Guy Jr. and Lisa Guy dismembered. Joel Guy Sr. had been stabbed 42 times with a knife, damaging his lungs, liver, and kidneys. His hands and his arms were severed at the shoulder blade. His legs were removed at the hip, and his right hand was removed. And his right hand was found in splattered blood upstairs in the home gym that he had created. And Lisa Guy was stabbed 31 times by the front door, with such extreme force that 9 of her ribs had been severed. Her legs were cut off below the knee, and her arms at the shoulder. Even more gruesome than that, her head was found in a pot boiling on the stove, which is just awful. Investigators also found a 45-gallon drum, or 45-gallon container, which had corrosive chemicals in it, and in the corrosive chemicals were human remains, were the limbs of the victims, and the investigators referred to this as a diabolical stew of human remains. How did Joe Guy Jr. become a suspect in this case? Well, he left a 5-page bloody notebook in the bedroom that he had been staying in when he was staying for Thanksgiving. And in it, he wrote how he was going to murder his parents in detail. He put what supplies he was going to use, how he was going to do it, what the motive was. Everything you could imagine was in this notebook, and this notebook was dubbed the Book of Premeditation. And apparently, Joel had been planning this for weeks. His parents knew that they were going to cut him off, despite not being in that group chat. He knew something was coming. And because he knew they were going to retire, so he had his suspicions that he was going to get cut off financially. So on November 7th, 2016, Joel started making purchases for supplies like knives and chemicals and plastic containers and plastic sheeting. He knew his parents had a $500,000 life insurance policy. And the life insurance policy said that if one of them either died or went missing, that whoever was listed on the life insurance policy would get that money. So Joel assumed that his name was on that life insurance policy, and he thought he was going to receive all of this money if something happened to his parents. So on November 26th, 2016, the Saturday after Thanksgiving, Joel waited for his mother to go grocery shopping, so he knew his dad was going to be alone. And that's when he killed his father, when she was out shopping. So when his mother came home, he surprise attacked her at the front door, which is why there were groceries strung all over the floor. Joel's intention was that he was going to burn down the house after pieces of his parents were decomposed. So that's why he put the limbs in the acid. He was going to disintegrate them and decompose them enough so that they could go down the drain, and then he was going to set the house on fire. But he cut his hand really bad during the attacks, so he abandoned that idea and instead turned the thermostat up to like somewhere in the 90s to try to increase the speed of decomposition of the body parts. Investigators also found sewer line cleaner, a bag of baking soda, liquid fire, nitric acid, drain opener, lye, food grade hydrogen peroxide, bleach, and a bleach sprayer upstairs. And they also found a note in an open suitcase that depicted the name and the Louisiana address of the Ace hardware store, along with notation about sewer line cleaner. So they find the book and they find this receipt of where all of this was purchased. That's not good for Joel, because that same afternoon that he killed his parents, there was video footage of him at the local Walmart buying supplies. And you can actually see on his one hand that he had a bandage on it, and that was one of the cuts that he had from killing his parents. He also drained as much money from his parents' bank accounts as he could the same day that he murdered them. And then he returned to Baton Rouge and waited for the payment from the life insurance policy. I mean, really, dude? So once investigators saw the notebook and they had the receipt, they decided to put an FBI surveillance team on him in Baton Rouge to follow what he was doing and where he was going. And on November 29th, 2016, as Joel was going to his car to go somewhere, FBI pounced and they arrested him as he was trying to leave. And in the trunk of the car, which is interesting, there was a meat grinder. Nobody's sure what that meat grinder was intended for, but they did in fact find a meat grinder. So despite having a massive amount of evidence against him, Joel decided he was going to plead not guilty. But if he was found guilty, he wanted the death penalty. And then he tried to play lawyer. He tried to say, well, since my parents were dead and my name is on the insurance policy, that it was unlawful for law enforcement to do a search of the house because he owned the house. Except that's not how this works. You can't just kill your parents and be like, oh, I own the home now, so law enforcement can't go there. Like, no, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. And also, his half-sisters don't even know if his name was on the life insurance policy. It could have not been. Then it wouldn't have mattered. But anyway, all right, Joel, this is not how this works. So on October 2nd of this year, of 2020, Joel was convicted of 2 counts of premeditated first-degree murder, and it only took the jury 4 hours to come to this conclusion. And on November 19th of this year, which is my birthday, Joel's going to go back to court for his sentencing hearing to decide whether or not he's going to get 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole after 51 years that will be served at the same time or consecutively. So that's what they're going to decide on. Either way, he's going to be locked up for a long time. And if perchance he does get put on parole after 51 years, he will be 83. So I think the probability of him getting parole is pretty slim at that point. But anyway, so this case has some theories about it that I want to talk about. But let's be clear, I think we can safely say that this case was motivated by money. So Joel didn't want to be cut off financially because I don't think he actually wanted to work. I mean, it's clearly he didn't want to do anything. Mom and Dad are paying for everything. Why would he go and get a job if all of his finances are already being paid for? I mean, who goes to college for a decade and gets everything paid for them? Like literally everything. Your rent, your meals, your college education. Not many people. Nobody that I know. Another theory is that I had read online, and this is just speculation. There's no evidence or proof of this, but some people think that maybe Joel was gay, and maybe his parents knew that he was gay, and because he grew up in a very religious area and people went to church all the time, it was a very religious area that he lived in. Maybe his father disowned him because they didn't want a gay son. But again, this is just speculation, because his half-sister, Angela Crane, said that Lisa Guy, Joel's mother, only worked to provide a paycheck for Joel so that they could pay for him. That's the only reason she worked. And what better way of saying I love you than sending your child money financially, keeping them financially stable? I mean, to me, I don't really see motive in wanting to kill a parent because that just doesn't make any sense. And another reason why people think this is because right after Joel got arrested, he made a phone call. And the first phone call that he made was to a friend of his who he had gone to school with, and also this guy was a roommate of Joel's at one point in time. So during Joel's trial, they played this phone call between this gentleman and Joel basically made a remark about how this guy was the only person he ever cared about. So some people took that out of context and thought, oh, well, maybe they were lovers. But again, there's no evidence really to suggest that he was in fact gay. That's just a theory. And his half-sisters during the court case said that Joel Guy Sr. and Lisa really loved Joel. They loved him a lot, and in fact, the one half-sister also claimed that Joel's parents memorialized Joel's room with his toys and pictures in his old bedroom. And to me, that doesn't sound like parents that disown their child. I mean, if someone disowns you, they're not going to keep a memorial in your bedroom. To me, that doesn't sound like someone who's disowning you. And it's also possible that since Joel was extremely smart, he thought he could have gotten away with the murders. Just because he's book smart doesn't mean he's street smart. And I mean, he did leave a book of premeditation in the where the murders took place, so he was kind of sloppy. And there were receipts at the crime scene, so maybe he wasn't thinking like, oh, I'm going to be caught, because in his head he was thinking, oh, I'm so smart, nobody's going to find out. That's another possibility, but we really don't know. So I want to know what you think. What do you think about this case? I find this case very disturbing. If it was purely for money, like, he's got issues. If your parents love you and they're supporting you financially but want you to be an independent man, they're allowed to cut you off financially. So I don't think he was gay, and even if he was, I don't think the main motive was, oh, my parents disowned me. That theory doesn't make any sense to me. I just think this guy had issues. Maybe he had some mental instability. I don't know. So I want to know what you think. So leave a comment down below and let me know. As always, thanks for watching. If you enjoy this kind of content, please consider subscribing. If you have any suggestions, cases, or stories you would like me to cover, please feel free to leave a comment down below. And as always, stay safe.